Now, Islam has never gone down that road. Celibacy is not a virtue for us. In fact, we're very suspicious of it. It's true that fairly early on in our history, amongst many of the Salaf, there were those who believed that the renunciation of the flesh was a useful aid to detachment from the world. Abu Sulaiman ad-Darani, one of the great amongst the Salaf, whose name we've come across several times already, said, whoever marries has inclined towards the world. We'll encounter some more of his sayings later on. But this view never prevailed for two reasons. Firstly, that it's not the Sunnah. An-nikahu sunnati, says the sound hadith, فَمَنْ رَغِبَ عَنْ سُنَّتِي فَلَيْسَ مِنِّي. Marriage is my sunnah, and whoever departs from my sunnah or chooses other than my sunnah is not of me. It's not one of us. It's unambiguous. And the second reason is that Islam is optimistic and has a high view of the human condition. We don't have a Christian type idea of original sin that links sexuality and sexual desire in with the whole complex of sinfulness that it takes to be the human condition. Islam is cheerful and optimistic. It likes optimism. It wishes people to be happy. And the kind of happiness that it has sketched for us, however dimly we may envisage it, for the blessed in the Akhirah, is clearly something that embraces everything that is true and good and brings happiness in this world, including this aspect of the human condition. Again, our paradise is sexualized. So we're very different to them in this respect. And certainly in classical Islam, when the early celibate possibility had been definitively left behind, although there are some ulama, such as Ibn Taymiyyah, for instance, who never married, nonetheless, overwhelmingly, the way of the ulama and the great ones of Islam is the sunnah of marriage. So we find Imam al-Nawawi, radiallahu anhu, saying, all passions harden the heart, with the exception of sexual desire, which softens it. And Al-Qadi Iyad, in his Shifa, in his glorious celebration of the prophetic magnificence and perfection in this area, says, nothing that could draw a human being away from God could have been made beloved to the Rasul, alayhi salatu wasalam. This is one implication of the sound hadith, where he says, حُبِّبَ إِلَيَّ مِن دُنْيَاكُمْ ثَلَاث. Three things of your world, of your dunya, have been made beloved to me. Beloved, a big word. النِّسَاء وَالطِّيب وَقُرَّةُ عَيْنِ فِي الصَّلَاةِ. Women, including this sexual dimension of marriage, perfume, and the delight of my eye has been placed in prayer. So it's unambiguous, to the extent that several of the great ulama of Islam have written what we would today coyly describe as pillow books. This was one of the areas of Islamic civilization that was particularly widely experimented with and produced some very interesting literary products. Imam Suyuti, for instance, radiallahu anhu, wrote no fewer than 9 books on how to keep your wife happy. Imam Ibn Jama'ah, another great Shafi'i scholar who's buried in Mu'alla in Mecca, wrote a book called Nuzhatul Albab Fima La Yujad Fi Kitab, also on this ilm. And the great Ottoman Shaykh al-Islam Kemal Pashazadeh, who was Shaykh al-Islam in the early days of the reign of Sultan Suleiman Qanuni, also wrote a book on this particular fan, this particular ilm nafi', this useful science. And that was never regarded as problematic or beneath the dignity of the ulama. This is part of the fullness of the Muslim's life. Now, when we deal with the text of Imam al-Ghazali, we have to bear this in mind. But we have to bear in mind that Imam al-Ghazali is aware that this is a dialectical issue, inasmuch as with the question of hunger, it's the golden mean that has to be looked for. He talks actually less about this than about the question of hunger and how you deal with eating, illustrating, no doubt, the fact that this was less deeply problematized in Islamic civilization than the problem of actually eating. So he has 3 sections on it as opposed to 5 on hunger. But it's worth noting that he does deal with it also elsewhere in the Ihya. He has a book called Kitab Adab al-Nikah, the book of the proprieties of marriage, where implicitly he talks about this desire.